Where you're born? When?
Mm-hmm. You want me to go now?
Yeah.
Okay, I was born in, it's like I said, Indian Territory. It's what now is Oklahoma. June the 5th, 1907. And I was,
No Man's?
yeah, it was called No Man's Land. You know this little strip across up here, Oklahoma looks like a flag,
Mm-hmm.
Well, this little strip right across here. Mother and Daddy were married in Liberal, Kansas, just across the line from Oklahoma, what it was now, Oklahoma. In a little dugout, if you could imagine.
What's a dugout?
That's little, we call them storm houses. See, they built the houses underground. And I can't hardly imagine. Daddy said he rode that night with the doctor. Old doctor stayed all night. So I have a little card from Daddy. I don't remember just when it stated, but a little birthday card, and it said that it was a dark and stormy night. The doctor, he rode after the doctor, and then there's just a little black-headed girl. Kind of cute, wasn't it?
The dugout, was it all below ground?
Uh-huh.
In a cave?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. See, I just can't imagine if you can either. How they, mothers endured, and how, the lineage, everything, anything. And Mother said that the day they were married, of course, there's this horse and buggy, and she said Daddy brought her back by the little place, where they were going to live, and then all brides went home, first night.
Mm-hmm.
That tradition still kind of stays in my mind,
So after your wedding night, they all went back to
After, and Mother said one of her brothers come in from the field, and she asked Grandmother, said, "What's the cake for?" And so she told me that she'd baked us a cake. And she said she was scared to death. And she would, when they come to the little dugout, he showed her where they were going to live. She was 17 years old. So,
how long have you lived there?
well, Ruth was born there. There's two kiddos. And I can't remember when then Daddy bought land then, further land. See, he homesteaded on this land. You just go down there and you just mark it off, and you have to live there a long time before you possess it, maybe a year, I'll put it like that. And so then we moved to, Daddy bought land and built us a house. And I lived there till I was 17, and we moved to Texas.
How many kids?
I had three.
And they all were born in Oklahoma?
Earl was born in Texas.
And how'd you come down to Texas?
Well, we come to Texas twice or three times. One time we come in the wagon, and that's a real interesting thing, if you can imagine, or if you've ever seen pictures of that. We would drive so many days, and then Daddy would try to camp at a place where we could have water, and maybe get eggs, put things like that, and cook at night. We had, of course, our chuck wagon, all fixed. And we also had an old dog that walked to Texas with us. We called him Old Kaiser. He's an old fussy dog.
So how'd you come down through Texas? Did you come all the way through?
We come through, I'd have had time to think on that. I can't remember. We crossed the Wichita River, I know, and just drove across that. Some water, not much. And I could take the map and go tell.
Did y'all come all the way through here though? Stop? Were y'all heading to here?
Oh no, not in South Texas. I didn't come to South Texas until after. I guess that's when Marianne was little.
Okay. So where was this y'all?
No, wait a minute, hon. Let me think, huh?
So where y'all came across Texas? Where'd y'all stop at?
We stopped in. Grandfather had what he called Daddy's daddy now. They were from Iowa,
Okay.
and they had migrated to Texas, and they'd bought land all up and down the Brazos River, and that's where we come to.
Okay.
Grandfather and grandmother's was away to college with her daughters, and we stayed with grandfather. And that's when Earl was born.
Okay.
So let's see what else.
So, when did you meet Grandpa? How old were you? About
19. Mm-hmm. I was 19, and then we were married a couple of years.
so how'd y'all meet?
That's what I said he'd come to. It's kind of I guess, I don't know how you call it. And he just come into the family. He was the boys' ages. We didn't think of courting.
Okay.
We just went to church together, and really, I didn't think of him as a boyfriend. He was more like one of the family. And he'd go away, and like to he shifted around with his uncles. And he would maybe drop me a card. He'd come back and come by and stay all night with the family. He stayed mostly with my cousins, the boys his age. Zero and them were younger. Yeah. And he just went from that to that. He just he was a little bit anxious to get married every once in a while. That turned me off. I've often thought, I wondered why I wasn't an old maid.
How old were you when you got married?
Because I was about 22. See, I never did think of, having a real boyfriend like the kids do now. I don't know whether, if we went places to parties and things like that, well, you, this Ruth and me and the kinfolks, the cousins and things, we go to house parties. Well, Gibbon just fit it in there. And I never did, I thought I guess I like men like that now. I like men, but, I don't think of a courtship or anything. And I've wondered about, why even I got married. And then I went to work. I nursed for about 3 years. And I guess he did.
In the hospital?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Should have kept nursing because, see, I like just a little bit. I could have been an RN. And but I guess he was just interesting. And he always stayed that way.
What was he like?
He's a real sweet guy. I think of the good things now. We had there were times that we're not, I think everybody goes through times that's not so nice, and, you go through difficult times, but after a while, well, I guess that he always made me feel like I was complimentary to him. I think he loved me a lot. He had his rough age, he was, he had that element within, see, different from what I had. See, I was nurtured and loved, and we were poor, but we had everything, I think back now, we were talking about that the other day, someone was talking about, beans and cornbread. I said, we always had, well, I guess it'd be a Larkin and I said, we always had plenty, and we eat because we were hungry, not because of, what you call junk food now. And families would get together at night, and they all went together in big groups to church. Most of the time that there was kinfolk. But we had but all the family was good.
Grandpa got married, what kind of work?
Artfield.
Both of them work?
Working out of Wichita Falls. Had said his past had about 75 cents in his pocket. We married, and I was called on a special duty at the same time, and he said, no working. And I didn't.
Oh, he didn't want you working anymore after that?
He said he'd make it. We did. And we stayed there. We worked from one payday to the next. I can't remember how that went, but anyway, we roomed and boarded until he got his check, and we got our little apartment. I've got the picture of it in Wichita Falls, and I could have gone right on in because we lived right across the street from the General Hospital, Wichita Falls, but he still didn't want me to work. I never did work.
Did you have any kids yet?
We had our first baby in 15 months, and in 22 months we had another one.
That was Charles
And then
Jimmy.
let me think, what did I say the first one?
15 months after you had.
Well, then in 15 months we had another one. We had 3 in 3 years.
That was in Wichita Falls?
Those things just worked out real good.
So what made y'all migrate down this way?
Probably oil work. See, he was a crew pusher, we'll call it, for Alan Morris out of Houston. But first we come out of pilot. And see, when Jim was about 6 weeks old when I went to pilot with him, Jim was working out. But he's working for Alan Morris, a big drilling company. And so he went from that, and he went from there to Houston, Conroe. That's where Marianne was born. And we just right on up, he come right on up there. And so we bought us a place in Houston and started our house. And then his brother-in-law wanted him to start contracting. And they were out of Freer. And I think if I knew how to locate it, Gilbert wanted to be a builder. And I think there'd be a little house out here in Coons, out of the baby. And we had a little, it just then, see, they were having a hard time. And they owned, now this Gilbert and his brother-in-law, wooden rig, just before the steel rigs come up. See, they were rig builders. And we had one little rig, wooden rig out in that bay, and come up from next door. And we've thought about that, and no insurance. And we've thought about that a lot out here, just out from White. And that house is out there, and Earl may know where it is, because he probably helped build it. So it just went from that to there. He was some contracting business. And just, out of it.
So was this y'all's first house in Portland here? When you're in there? So,
and then see, we went through that, what the depression was it when Marianne was a teenager, when Jimmy graduated. That was another hard year for her.
did Jimmy graduate out here at Portland?
Yeah, he worked out here from Jen. Gilbert worried about him. He worked out here to Jen, I think, till I went.
Which Jim was that?
The one that was right here.
Okay.
And you talked to Mr. Andrews about him. See, they were sharing jobs. I mean, Jimmy's going to school, trying to finish school, Charles was working. They shared clothes and everything. You just imagine. I said Marianne had wore more big sack skirts, Give off that new rig then. We borrowed about $10,000. And
That's the big bucks.
couldn't make a thing. We paid on that thing, and he tried his best to sell it then, and then work opened up, and just worked out fine. That's when he really, then he worked on, I think, Troy 3 years before he retired, because he either didn't pay Social Security. Did they pay Social Security?
I don't know if I did.
Well, anyway, we didn't have enough money. We couldn't live off of it. So he worked on it. So his Social Security would be big enough that we could combine it with some savings. And that was coming clear on, till this time. I tell you, Daddy died. Daddy was what, 74? 76? What you kind of consider young.
He fished and golf very much?
He loved to fish. And he played some golf. Yeah, he liked things like that. He said if he'd taken care of his health, he would have been a real you know, healthy man. And because of the raise I were, you know. And of course him having the period that he went through that he drank. And I guess that was about the worst thing he did. Of course, after he obeyed the gospel, then he quit all that.
How old was he then?
Well, he was an elder for 16 years. I'll go back and think, you know, he would say this if he hadn't read constructive books, and he would tell the things, you know, that he had abused his life with, you know, how different things would have been. And he was not hard to convert. We never did bring anything home unpleasant from the church.
Who's converted?
Oh, I think that Harold Elliott had a lot to do with it. There was a lot of them. It's like Johnny Thompson told him, he said, Brother Ray, he said, I know that I didn't plant the seed, but I'm so glad to water it. And they're just things, I think, my shortcomings with him. We didn't talk much about church. Alvin Johnson was a real good Bible scholar. Mr. Elliott was. Mr. Elliott he said he never did leave the Bible at home when he came to sing. And Gib would study and believe it. The only thing he just couldn't believe that it was the only church. And that's what he said after he come into church. He said he knew that we'd never change. And he wanted to be with his family. But then he learned. You know, he learned. And I had a young teacher tell me one time, well, she come to see me after Grandpa was gone. And she was in and out. In fact, I did nearly all of the cut-out work for their classes. And she told me that she should have married her sweetheart, that he didn't believe that it was on the church. And he said he just married her to have it. Mm-hmm. And so she said she just quit him. And she was so sorry that she did. But Grandpa wouldn't be agnostic about it. And I'll tell you something from my shortcomings. I think about the morning that Grandpa obeyed the gospel. He was real hard for the family to talk to, like any Kendall. They don't believe anything, they're just those. And so he, that morning was Buccaneer Days, Splash Days, something. Anyway, there was some movie actors in town. I can't tell you who it was, but you know, they'd always have a special person to, you know, to draw. And so that morning, someone made their mark to me, where's Gilbert? And so this is ugly now. I said back, he's probably off over Splash Days looking at that girl. Isn't that terrible? And so that's just like, that's awful. Anyway, about that time, he come in and sat down by me. And so he went to church with me. And he'd stand out by the window waiting to walk home with me. That's even when Ayler's and them were down there. Of course, Ayler went right on to church with me. He never did obey the gospel. But anyway, well, the invitation song, here he went. And see, I wasn't expecting that at all. And so, anyway, well, I can't remember about our baptistry closing, but we did have a little baptistry in there then, in that little old building. And so, yes, Johnny Thompson. Johnny said, Johnny, be careful, I smoke. Johnny said he was real nervous, you know, and Johnny told him he'd be all right. He didn't have a cigarette. That's right after he's baptized, and he was waiting for his to get dry clothes. So evidently he's just baptized in his shorts and things. Everything was so different, like I was baptized in a horse thing. And my daddy took me where he was baptized he's 17 years old, in a pond. And I watched old brother Doctor baptized down here in the bay. Everybody just went and took their cars and shined them in the bay. So,
how is the Parker Indian blood?
That's what I was going to tell you a while ago about me talking to mother's sister. She says there's not any. But she's mistaken. But I don't have anywhere to find it. Now, grandmother looks just like mother's mother. And I'll tell you, this is all that and this is not fact. I can't tell you this for truth. And I cannot find out. Mother was born and pretty well raised in Stephenville. And she thinks, and it's not fact either, that she was a Wilson. And the Wilsons who lived, and Daddy told me before he died, that she had kinfolks all around down there yet. And grandmother's daddy, left his family and with her with a big family of children. She raised them alone, and she would never talk about it. Grandmother was a real quiet little old Indian woman. And then her kids married, and one of them's the son is 101 that's living in Oklahoma now. And he married a full-blood Indian. But those Indians, the ones that I know of that lived all back in there in that territory, they were good Indians, but they were, what would you call them? Well, they had you could hear them, they had their parties and they rode, they were real Indians that lived all in there back of this.
Never were you?
No. Kind of like the Mexicans down here. George says it was all Mexicans anyway. Your uncle. Anyway, and Grandpa had a real nice home. He dug now. You don't know what a dugout is, but he dug all of his house underground and he had it up about so high, the top part. In other words, you could have windows.
Okay.
But now I don't remember. I'd like to know about that in their little underground where I was born. But it was just down in the ground.
So, how was Mom raising her up? What was she like? Good kid?
Oh, yeah.
Was she always into stuff? Or?
Not really, huh? She's easy punished. Oh, Jimmy was not rowdy. We had to keep him. And you know, they're so different now. Jimmy was like when he was in France and everything, he loved us. But he couldn't care less whether he heard from us or whether they heard from him. We'd call France and they would wait a week or two. We would okay to talk to Jimmy. He's anxious all the time. If he worked out here on a job and he got vexed and walked off, he just walked off. But he never, Kermit Elliott, if they got work late, Kermit'd come in, he'd get food for them. Jimmy'd never send in to tell us what's happening. You see, he's so different now. And Charles would, man, he wouldn't worry you for anything.
So, what do you think of Dad when he first started supporting Mom?
Well, that wasn't a necessary question. Don't tell him I said it, but I'll tell you a little secret. His grandma, his old grandma, Mitchell said about having her girls. One time we were talking about those girls. She told me, when I was having them, I didn't know why. But she said, I know now. And that's when we got buzzy. We didn't know why. But we got them, we know now. Worth every bit of it. That's one thing you don't ever point your finger. I don't know what to say about these kids. Anyway, he was a good one.
So who turned him around?
He just turned himself around. He was, within, he was real good. He thought he knew it all, like religion and everything. And, he was funny. He was snatching that monkey suit off and a hitchhike, I think. Woo, he's a booger.
Snatching that monkey suit
He
out.
called his army suit monkey suit. And he stayed in San Antonio the whole time he was. And every weekend you hear some squealing break, or you know Buzzy'd come down to the corner of the end of the time. But he didn't get easy. He sure didn't. I didn't know his family that well. I knew George and Forrest. And the way I knew Forrest and George worked for Daddy. And George was I guess that's before him and Doris married. But he said Daddy Gilbert was more like a real daddy to him than his own daddy. And see, he was real close with, confidential, everything. He's real close. Now, oh yeah, if he was here, he'd tell you that now. And, but Forrest was, we just knew him as a young boy, and I never did know anything. I never did know anything against Forrest and Miss Crawford if she's living today. I know that Miss Crawford told me, see, I didn't know Mary and Buzzy planned to marry, and Miss Crawford called me and told me that to tell the kids she had Forrest.
Is that how you found out?
Yeah, and I didn't know how to say. Mary bought all of her wedding things and everything. Well, I couldn't afford them anyway. And she's working CP&L. Anyway, well,
Who was working CP now?
Mary, and she's bookkeeper over there.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, she stayed right on with them too. Even after behind the counter, after she was big enough to have her baby. Mary Ann was real smart. She is yet.
Did she work after they got married?
Mm-hmm.
Did she still work at CP now?
Mm-hmm. I think she had to take a little bit of night school. What's the difference in ready writing and shorthand?
No idea.
What's the difference on it? She had to take, she didn't look like bookkeeping, and what she didn't realize, she didn't like bookkeeping in school. And what she didn't realize that really every company or everybody, now this is what I was told, I never kept books, that they set up their own books. They have their own style or mode or whatever it is, like bookkeeping. And after she went into it, well, she needed either ready writing or shorthand, and I can't remember which. Anyway, she went to drawings, I believe, and took her, whatever she had to supplement with. Yeah, she worked, I guess, until just before Gary was born.
So what, how long was that? Was Gary born pretty soon after they got married?
Mm-hmm, about 10 months. And see, Buzzy was he was in San Antonio. Just come home. They had their little apartment. Miss, you don't know Miss, used to be the old postmaster here, DeMoot. They had all those old big old houses back in there over the bay. Miss DeMoot, she's a real dainty, sweet little old woman. And she told me, she said, when Buzzy comes, of course everybody had their opinion of Buzzy. And good, that's good. Anyway, she said that when he come to an apartment, she said, oh, goodness, she said, I didn't know how I was going to handle that. And so she said, and then we brought that little dainty bride in. She said she was so tickled at her. And she was.
Just let them have it?
Oh, yeah. I've been here many years.
Been here?
We moved here I come up the world tumbling social routine, different things, Everything's so different. We were young. Didn't know anybody. Went to church all the same time. It's far.
Too far.
They didn't know the kids, Melvin Bloyer and